Hi everybody, welcome to another video. This one is it's actually a child's toy that I've been doing up. It's a little buggy, but I thought I'd do a video on the process, because it's the same as you would do for a car bumper or fender, as you say in the States, for a fairing panel, anything really that's made out of plastic. So obviously we prepared the surface. This one was really, it'd been out in the sun a long time, and to be honest it was going to be a throwaway thing, but then I thought, no, I'll have a go at it. So I sanded it all back, got it all down to how I wanted it, and now we're just doing the process from start to finish really. But the main reason for the video is I'm using a GF3, which is a little minigun, little cheap minigun. And it's going to do the primer, it's going to do the high build primer as well. And I wanted to show some of the videos I've done. I've had comments of people saying, what's a good all-round gun? Something that, I appreciate. I've got quite a lot of guns, and people don't have the resources to actually do anything like I do, as far as, spend the money on my hobbies as I do. So I realised that. So I thought, well, I'd do a video with the GF3, simply because I've used the GF3 before for doing a tank from start to finish, except the priming, because I used the primer gun for that. So what I've done is just basically doing the adhesion promoter. And the other thing with this is it's really cold. It's about 5 degrees Celsius, which is, what's that, about 41, 42 Fahrenheit. So it is really cold. So I'm using a heat gun and a heat lamp to get as much heat into the plastic as I can before I start spraying, because it just, the stuff won't go off. It's a 2-pack primer, and I've used this before. I've done the wife's car once outside when it was really cold. And if you don't get any heat into it, the stuff just doesn't go off. It just stays in its liquid state presumably until it gets warmer. So you have to put some heat into it. So that's what I'm doing. And you'll see me using a little heat gun. You saw me just now using a little heat gun. It's a really good idea to get one of those, even if you're not in such cold conditions. It's a really good idea to get one of those, because it does help the temperature of the surface, and the temperature of the surface is it is as important as the temperature you're spraying in, because if the temperature outside is cold but the surface is quite warm, you can get away with it. But if it's both cold, as I say, it just doesn't want to go off. So you do need some heat from somewhere. So I'm using a heat gun and a heat lamp. If you've just got a heat gun, then that's absolutely fine, it just takes longer. If you've got just a heat lamp, then obviously that's fine, it just takes longer. If you've got both, it's good. You'll get away with your primer. You'll get away with putting a lot of heat into the whatever you're doing, the material. In this case, obviously it's plastic. You'll get away with putting a fair bit of heat into that plastic. If it's cold like it is, obviously the heat goes quickly. There's a bit later on in the video where you'll see I've literally gone round the sides, because the heat lamp doesn't hit the sides very well. I've gone round the sides with a heat lamp, and you'll see I just checked the temperature, and where I've immediately finished with the heat lamp, it's about 24 degrees Celsius, which is about 75, something like that in Fahrenheit. And then I just turn it round to the other side, and on the other side it's about 15 degrees, and that's literally how quick it's gone, because it's so cold around. So you need to work reasonably quick for that heat to work, and as I say, the stuff just doesn't go off if it's not hot enough, or not warm enough I should say, rather than hot, because 25 is still not hot. So anyway, back to the original idea about the video. So the little GF3, it's got a 1.2 tip. Now this is a high build primer, and ideally for a 1.2 tip you wouldn't use high build, because it's just too thick for a 1.2 tip. Normally you'd use a 1.8, something like that, but the miniguns are normally not made in bigger tips. I think the biggest tip minigun you'll get is a 1.4 on an SRI, and that's still not really big enough for high build primer. So we're spraying high build primer, and the reason we can get away with it is because we're using thinners, or reducer as you say in the US, to thin it down, and that's what makes it possible. So you can spray anything within reason, as long as the material is thin enough to go through the hole in the end of the cap, basically, or nozzle, should I say, rather than a cap. So you can get away with it, but bear in mind this is just the seat part, and I'm just putting another lot of adhesion promoter on it. You see I've got two of the GF3s, one in each of the holders, so I can sort of like mix and match what I do, and it helps to get as much done as possible, because what you'll find is in these really cold temperatures, a job that in say 24, 25, so 75 Fahrenheit, 77 Fahrenheit, something like that, a job that would take in those sort of temperatures an hour and a half, takes 2.5 to 3 hours in these sort of temperatures. But you know, it is what it is. I haven't got heating in the garage. Well, I have actually. I've got like some electric heaters, but it's absolutely pointless because the heat just goes so quickly. It's pointless. So I prefer to heat the work up and do that rather than try and heat the whole workshop, because it just doesn't work. It'd just be a huge waste of energy, really. So anyway, back to what I was saying about the guns. I've got two of the guns on the go. One's with the adhesion promoter and one's with the normal high build primer. But as I was saying, I'm going off track here, I think. But as I was saying, the primer will go through whatever you want it to go through. So this is the first time I've used a GF3 in 1.2 to do high build primer, and I would have used the 1.8 and not thin the primer down, because what you need to do if you're using normal high build primer through a smaller tip, as I say, you need to thin it down, and that means that if you're after the build, you know, the fact that there's some scratches or whatever on whatever you're doing, if it was a fender or whatever, plastic fender, you've sanded it down, you've still got some small scratches there that won't take a base coat because it will show underneath. So you need to put a bit of high build primer down, whether it's just to give it a smoother surface or whether you want to sand that high build primer down afterwards to give you a super smooth surface. So you need to put enough material on to cover the scratches. So what I'm doing by thinning the primer down, it means that you have to put many more coats than you would normally do, and by many more, I'm probably thinking twice as much, maybe a little bit more. One of the nice side effects of using a thinner primer is you tend to get a flatter finish, because the stuff's coming out finer. You tend to get a flatter finish, so it may well work in some cases that you don't need to sand back afterwards. And certainly in the case of this, there's a couple of small lumps of rubbish in it. Well, lumps is the wrong word really, because they are quite small. But it's inevitable working in the conditions that I do that you do get bits of rubbish in the paint or primers in this case. So there's a couple of little bits of sanding down, or maybe just a razor blade would just take those little lumps out before the base coat. I'm not sure yet. I'd have to, you know, when I do it, I'll try. But it'll even just be a little sanding of those spots. But I think the rest of it is going to be fine. I don't think the rest of it will need a full sanding down. So that's one of the sort of like side benefits, I suppose, of using the stuff that's so thin. Of course, as I said before, the big drawback is the amount of time it takes you to do it, because the stuff is so thin. You're just relying on coats, and I think I did something in the region of about 6 or 7 coats altogether to cover up the various scratch marks in the plastic. Whereas with a 1.8 gun, certainly 3, probably 2 good coats would have done it. But of course you've got the fact that it's really cold, so you can't put the stuff on too heavy because you will get runs, which I appreciate with primer isn't the end of the world, because as I say, a lot of time you're going to sand primer down anyway. But going back to the cold aspect of this, it really does, the heat goes so quickly. You see me putting the heat gun back there, and you see the temperatures here. And the temperature there is about 21. This is Celsius, 22. Now it's literally with the lamp on and the heat gun going round it, and you get as much temperature as you can. Now it'll already be dropping now, and then you start applying what you can. And don't, as I say, don't overdo it, because you will get runs in it, because it's just so cold. And I'm applying heat more or less immedately after I've finished spraying as well. I don't like spraying with a lamp on. Sometimes you have to, but I really don't. They're supposed to be fine to do it, but for some reason I just don't like doing it. And I don't know why, because it, as I say, it is supposed to be safe to do it, as far as fire going, except catching a light or explosion or whatever. It is supposed to be safe to do it, but I don't really like doing it. So you'll see most of the time I switch the lamp off before I spray, so I try and get heat into whatever I'm spraying with a lamp, turn it off, spray, and then put the lamp on and the heat gun. But what I was going to say is, when you're applying heat like this in cold conditions, you normally get away with you'll get away with everything really, putting heat into the whatever you're spraying. But when you're putting heat afterwards, you do have to be careful, because the colder it gets, the more heat you put in on the outside. Seems to work fine for primer. It seems to work, in my case anyway, seems to work fine with base coat. I use a solvent base coat most of the time. It seems to work fine with that, but you will have trouble with top coat, with lacquer, because I mean, if you use a 2K lacquer like I do most of the time, simply because it's harder wearing, you'll find that if you put too much heat straight away afterwards, then you'll get solvent pop, little bubbles in it. So you do need to be careful with those, the clear coat, because you put it on reasonably thick, and again, if you put it on too thick, you'll get solvent pop. And that's because the solvent inside hasn't had enough time to evaporate out, and by putting the heat directly onto it with a heat gun, and I say with a heat gun because normally with a heat lamp it dries from the inside out, but you can still get it with a heat lamp, but it's rarer. But with a heat gun, if you're putting heat straight on clear coat after you've applied it, you will often get, when the weather's cold, because it just hasn't got enough time for the solvents to evaporate out, you can get solvent pop. So do be careful when you're doing that. But as I say, with primer, I've found that you can do it straight away afterwards, and it's not a problem. You don't get any solvent pop or anything like that. It just works fine. The only thing, as I say, you need to be careful of is clear coat. So once again, you see I'm trying to keep the heat up all the time, trying to keep it up, and I don't know whether you can see the gauge here, 21. Do I flip it round? I can't remember where it was, where it's, yeah, you can see it there, 17. You can see how cold it's gone just while you're doing the other side. I did that side just now, and then you do the other side, and you can see the heat in the other side. By the time you get around the other side with just taking the temperature, the heat is already gone. So you need to move quickly. I wouldn't normally want to paint in these conditions, but it is what it is. The temperature is really cold here at the moment. So, well, I know some of you guys in the States would get really cold temperatures. You'd be laughing when I say really cold, but for little old England, it's relatively cold. Not too damp though, which is normally the case. It normally gets cold and damp here. So you can see I'm just finishing it off. If you see the bits with the holes, there's a few bits with the holes, and they're where two black foot plates go. And I've got the stuff, you see it on the right hand side there, I've got the stuff to spray black separately. So you'll see some lines and a couple of marks there, which if you were going to make that good, you would sand it all down. But it's completely covered by those foot plates, so I haven't worried about it too much. But the rest of the plastic has come up really well, considering the state it was in. And I'll try and put a couple of pictures, if you can see the original. I'll put a couple of pictures at the end and see the original state of it. But as I say, I think you'll find it looks all right. And as I say, it's £25, so what's that, $30 odd gun, and it works really well for priming, so I can highly recommend it. Well, thanks for watching, everybody, and thanks to all the subscribers, by the way. I should have said that at the start, but I didn't. But thanks, everybody. Bye.